UFC Long Island Draftkings has released the salary so we could take our first look. You can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. Last week was a disaster. My lineups were like Ronnie Lawrence's takedown defense. Poop. And by the end of the night, I wanted to do what we all wanted to do during the Caio Borralho fight. I wanted to sleep. But round here, we understand the power of positive thinking, so that's in the rear view mirror we look toward this week. So as always, we start at the top of the slate, work our way down. This week, DraftKings wants us to spend $9,400 doubloons on Amanda Lemos. Now, Amanda Lemos is fighting Michelle Waterson this week. Amanda Lemos really let me down in her last fight against Jessica Andrade. She was an underdog in that fight, but what I was hoping was that she was going to be able to get the better of these striking exchanges and show off some of the power that she has shown in the past. And she was kind of doing that in the beginning when the fight was fought at range, but as soon as they hit the clinch, she gave up the first ever standing arm triangle in the UFC. And there's a reason why it was the first ever standing arm triangle in the UFC. It's because nobody's giving that up because they probably shouldn't be giving that up. But we see it work for Jessica Andrade in that fight because Amanda Lemos just didn't move. So it was really disappointing not only to see her lose, but that was also only 3 minutes into the first round. So we didn't really learn much about Amanda Lemos in that fight, and she didn't really learn much from that experience, I'm guessing, either. The only thing she could have learned from that experience is if somebody's wrapping their arms around my neck, I should probably move a little bit. So that sucked, but I do hope that she gets back on track this week against the karate hottie who is very hittable. Waterson should be at a strength disadvantage, and she's probably going to look like the much smaller fighter once they're in there. And for Waterson, we've seen her take a lot of damage in the past. She has a lot more miles on her than Lemos does, and I expect Lemos to land heavy, land early, land often, possibly even get a knockdown in this fight. But this is a hefty price to pay, especially for women's MMA, considering that most of these fights normally go the distance. So I wouldn't recommend playing her in your DraftKings lineup. If you did have to take a prop, I would say Amanda Lemos by decision. Next at 9,000, we have Punahele Soriano. He's going to be fighting Dalcha Lungiambula this week. This should be a pretty one-sided fight for Puna. Dalcha has solid power, but he doesn't really have the best gas tank. I think that Puna will be the better wrestler. I think he's going to have the cleaner hands. What I like for Soriano in this fight is that he's coming off of 2 straight losses, with the first one coming to Brendan Allen, who is really young, but he's super experienced. They went 3 rounds. And the other loss was a split decision loss to Nick Maximov, where Maximov just spammed takedowns, but on the feet, Puna was getting the better of those exchanges. And in that fight, he also went 3 rounds, which I think is important for a guy with limited experience and limited cage time because most of his fights are ending in the first round. So I think these are experiences that he's going to be able to build on, learn from those lessons, and come back much stronger. On the other side, you have Dalcha Lungiambula, who's also coming off of 2 losses where he lost pretty convincingly to Marc-Andre Barriault, and he showed piss-poor fight IQ against Cody Brundage, where he was seconds away from winning by knockout but decided to shoot for a takedown, put his neck in the perfect position to get guillotined. Can't trust a guy like that. So in this matchup, I think you have to give me the younger guy with the powerful hands, still improving, better wrestler. I think he's just better everywhere. And I think Punahele Soriano is going to be able to come up with a knockout here, and I don't expect a ton of people to be playing him this week. I just think those last 2 losses are going to hold down his ownership. But the pick for me in this fight is Punahele Soriano by knockout. The knockout prop is a little sus considering that he is not the highest output kind of guy, but I do think that he has the power and the placement to put Dalcha out. Next at 9,100, we have Sumudaerji. He's going to be fighting Matt Schnell this week. Off the bat, this looks like one of my favorite dog spots of the week. Sumudaerji's grappling is his biggest weakness. And time again, we see that grappling advantages can make some of even the best fighters look lost in there, and I think that's what we see if this fight hits the mat. The way that Matt Schnell moves from one position to the other on the ground is super slick, and I expect him to submit Sumudaerji this week. There are a few things at play here when it comes to picking this fight. For years, Matt Schnell has been considered chinny, and Sumudaerji has been considered a powerful puncher. But what if Matt Schnell is not as chinny as people think, and what if the perception of Sumudaerji's power is a result of him fighting bad competition in China? Matt Schnell has been KO'd before, multiple times, but he's never been knocked down in fights where that didn't happen, and Sumudaerji's knockouts are over really low-level competition competition on the regional scene. So those don't really hold all that much weight for me. What really stands out to me are the differences in experience, competition level, huge grappling advantage. Those things make me pretty confident in Matt Schnell this week. And all the way down to his low price from a DraftKings perspective, if he wins inside the distance, he breaks the slate. And just to add, the counter-striking of Matt Schnell is definitely underrated. He can crack, so don't be surprised if we see a club and sub for the underdog here. The pick for me is Matt Schnell inside the distance. Next at 9,000, we have Shane Burgos. He's going to be fighting Charles Jourdain this week. Do you remember that time that Shane Burgos was in that really boring fight? Me neither. This has fight of the night written all over it. You could expect some delicious violence. What I like about Shane Burgos is the output, some of the highest striking output in the game. And what I like for Charles Jourdain, for the sake of this fight, is that you, me, and him have all landed the same amount of takedowns in the UFC. So knowing that this is going to be strictly a stand-up affair, there's nothing that stops Shane Burgos from landing over 130 significant strikes this week. Only thing that would stop that is if there was a knockout from either side. Now the tricky part about this fight, and it actually makes me wish that it was lined closer and that it was priced closer on DraftKings, is that I think Charles Jourdain can match the output of Shane Burgos, and he's getting a lot better. He's still only 26 years old. He should be improving rapidly. He hasn't taken a ton of damage unlike Burgos, and his chin is basically a hockey puck. Like, he can get hit and just eat it. So I'm thinking that Charles Jourdain is going to be able to take Burgos' shots and return heavy power of his own. Skill-wise, I think these two are pretty closely matched, but when it comes to damage, durability, striking, defense, all these things favor the underdog. And Shane Burgos has been knocked down 5 times in his last 7 fights, and in his last 5 fights, he's absorbed over 540 significant strikes.
That's a lot of damage.
Charles Jourdain has been knocked down once in his last 5 fights and has only taken 287 significant strikes. Now, I personally love watching Shane Burgos fight. I think he has put on some of the most entertaining fights the UFC has ever seen, but this week, I think the pick for me will be the underdog in Charles Jourdain. And I think that's especially the case on DraftKings because I think he's live for a knockout finish in this spot, and even if he doesn't, but he lands crazy volume, he can score around 90 points. So the pick for me in this fight is Charles Jourdain, most likely by decision, but a knockout wouldn't shock me. And if you haven't already, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. You know how the algorithm works. And you guys crush the algorithm comments, by the way. Even those of you that are just like, for the algorithm, I know it's real. And speaking of real, we got real sus here at Dwight Grant sitting at 8,900. Now, he's fighting Dustin Stoltzfus this week, and I could tell you that I have never been on Dwight Grant in my life. In his last fight, I was telling you definitely don't play him, and ultimately he got knocked out violently by Sergey Kondozko. And I said don't play him on DraftKings, not because I thought he was going to get smoked the way that he did, but because Dwight Grant tends to have close fights all the time, no matter who he's fighting. You see this a lot in other sports, like football, for example, teams tending to play to the level of their competition. And I think Dwight Grant personifies that beautifully. I think he fights to the level of his competition more so than anyone I've ever seen. Like, I think that Dwight Grant would have a competitive fight against Francis Ngannou and an equally competitive fight against a block of Parmesan cheese. So he's a hard guy to trust and not normally somebody that you want to bet on, but this week things are a little different. I have a feeling that the body snatcher picks up a knockout in this fight and shows up on the winning DraftKings lineup. I've said in the past that his power is overrated, and I truly think that it is. And I say that because you see some other guys that have power, like Alex Pereira, for example. He's one of these guys that can generate a ton of power in a tight space. Even with his lead hand, it lands super heavy.
Because he's...
And Dwight Grant lands powerful punches, but he tends to throw big hooks with his entire body. Dwight Grant strikes like you would punch one of those punching machines at an arcade. So it's sloppy, but on the other side you have Dustin Stoltzfus, who isn't particularly good at anything. I think Stoltzfus could have a slight grappling advantage, but on the feet he doesn't really offer much. And what we learned last week with like Kennedy and Nzechukwu and Carl Roberson is sometimes you just have to attack the worst fighter on the slate, and I think that's what we would be doing this week by playing against Dustin Stoltzfus. So the pick for me in this fight is Dwight Grant. It's inside the distance, and I don't expect him to be highly owned. Next at 8,800, we have Miesha Tate. She's going to be fighting Lucky Lauren Murphy this week. Lucky is a fitting name for Lauren Murphy because she is lucky to have won her last 3 split decisions. To me, Miesha Tate is actually better everywhere: grappling, speed, striking technique, athleticism, youth, experience. There's a lot of things to like about Miesha Tate this week, and she had a hard time getting anything going in her last fight against Ketlen Vieira, but I think size played a huge factor there. Now she's going to be fighting down at 125 pounds, where I think she's going to match up physically very well this week. And against Lauren Murphy, that's extremely important because Lauren Murphy has success when she's able to bully her opponents. I don't think that she's going to be able to bully Miesha Tate in the clinch, and I can actually see Tate getting some takedowns of her own. And when you look at some of Lauren Murphy's losses, like Sarah McMahon, Liz Carmouche, Sarge Eubanks, you've got Valentina Shevchenko, the blueprint is there. You get her down, you keep her there, and I think that Miesha Tate can do the same thing, and she may even find a rear naked choke at some point if Murphy isn't careful and she gives up her back. I expect Miesha Tate to be pretty low owned this week and possibly good leverage from the rest of the card, because this card might be full of a lot of decisions, and while I do think that Miesha Tate wins this fight by decision, she might be able to get the takedowns, control time, and ground and pound necessary to score a lot of DraftKings points. Next at 8,700, we have Bill Algeo. He's going to be fighting Herbert Burns this week. Burns is stepping in on short notice for Billy Q, which sucks because we had an awesome fight laid out for these two, but I do think that this fight delivers as well, and I do not see this fight going the distance. Bill Algeo's the favorite because he's not stepping in on short notice. His opponent is. He's got the size advantage. He's got a huge striking advantage, but Herbert Burns is no slouch, and with 2 finishes in 2 UFC fights and finishing Derek Minner on the Contender Series, I think that he does pretty well this week. And I say that because Bill Algeo has bad takedown defense. He's been taken down several times in the UFC. He's been taken down 19 times in his 4 UFC fights, so he's averaging almost 5 takedowns given up per fight, while Gilbert Burns is averaging more than 4.6 per 15 minutes. And from a jiu-jitsu standpoint, I think that these two are worlds apart, so I think that Herbert Burns goes in there, blitzes him, gets him down right away, finds that submission, short notice, don't care.
Don't care, still don't care. I don't care. I don't.
Next at 8,600, we have Muslim Salikov. He's going to be fighting the Leech this week. These two should go to war, but I could also see it being a slow-paced fight where neither of them land too many strikes. Either way, I don't think that this is a fight that you want to be targeting on DraftKings. As I'm sure you know, Muslim Salikov is as decorated a striker as they come, but the truth is, man's getting old. He isn't putting people out the way that he once was, and he's been matched up with guys that are pretty durable lately, with Li Jingliang being as durable as they come. And Li Jingliang might look to grapple here if he does feel he's getting outstruck on the feet, but even then, I think that if he gets Salikov down, I don't expect him to stay there for that long. I think Salikov will have success when this fight is at range, where he could pick his shots, counter strike, and for Jingliang, I think that he would do his best work in a brawl, in close. So I think it comes down to which of these guys is going to be able to implement the style of fight that suits them best, and who's not going to give up the takedowns or two that could steal rounds. I'm tentatively going with Muslim Salikov for now. My mind could change on that. I'm not super confident on this side, but I think for now the pick is Muslim Salikov by decision. Next at 8,500, we have our main event favorite, Brian Ortega. He's going to be fighting Yair Rodriguez this week. At first glance, this is a striker versus grappler matchup, and it is, but Brian Ortega's striking is not too bad, and Yair Rodriguez has solid jiu-jitsu himself. I think this is going to be an awesome fight. Before getting absolutely obliterated by Max Holloway, Brian Ortega was ripping through the featherweight division. He picked up 7 straight finishes in 7 UFC fights, super impressive. Ortega has some of the slickest jiu-jitsu in the UFC, and he's got one of the most opportunistic clinch games we've ever seen. Evidence of that is when he fought Renato Moicano and he was able to basically grab a guillotine from behind his back. Or like when he jumped a guillotine against Cub Swanson, leaned back into it, lost his grip, and was able to re-establish grip and get him back in the guillotine all in like half a second. Crazy stuff. And his striking has really come along over the years as well. Like we saw against Korean Zombie, he looked career best on the feet. And on the other side, you have Yair Rodriguez, who's a great striker with a good chin, a ton of heart, but my issue with him is that his takedown defense isn't great, and he's willing to take a lot of risks. And he's not only willing to take risks on the feet where he has an advantage over most people, but he's also willing to do it on the ground. Rodriguez will put himself in a bad position to get into a better position, and that kind of stuff does not not work against a guy like Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega is not the kind of guy that you can make mistakes against at any point. Like in his last fight when he was fighting Alexander Volkanovski for the title, he was getting smoked, but still managed to put Volkanovski in potential fight-ending positions multiple times late in their fight. Positions like the triangle that he had him in, or that mounted guillotine. No other featherweight on the planet survives those positions the way that Alexander Volkanovski did. So I like T-City this week. I think it stays competitive on the feet, but in the clinch and on the mat, Ortega probably finds a submission or finishes the fight with ground and pound from mount. So the pick for me is Brian Ortega inside the distance. Next at 8,400, we have Jack Shore, undefeated, super impressive. There is a lot to like about Jack Shore, not only in this matchup, but in really a lot of matchups at 135 pounds. He's got good striking, and we know that he's got excellent grappling, very, very solid on the ground. But he has a tough task ahead of him this week against Ricky Simón, who has the second most takedowns in bantamweight history. And this fight kind of makes me feel like Ronnie Lawrence versus Said Yakub Kakramanov last week, where I think the person who is able to get their takedowns going is going to be the one to win this fight. And I worry for Jack Shore, somebody who's never lost before. What is he going to look like, say, in the third round if he lost the first two rounds because Ricky Simón just kept taking him down? And Ricky Simón could take down anybody. I think outside of that kind of fluky punch that he suffered against Uriah Faber, Ricky Simón has been a problem. And even if Jack Shore is able to get Simón down, I think that Ricky Simón just pops back up, and I think the same could be said for Shore. I don't think that Ricky Simón's going to be able to keep him down for all that long. Ricky Simón can't keep anybody down for all that long. Now, what I will say is that I think Jack Shore is the more dangerous guy. I think Ricky Simón is better at winning rounds, out-hustling people, doing things that the judges like to be able to get him the edge. But I think that Jack Shore is just more dangerous and more dominant. So you're looking at the steadiness of Ricky Simón versus the upside of Jack Shore. It's very hard to choose. Right now I'm giving the slight edge to Ricky Simón. My mind could change on this later in the week, but I'm going to go with Ricky Simón to win this fight by decision. I think that he gets the takedowns, wins 2 out of 3 rounds, survives on the feet. Ricky Simón has decent hands himself. I just think the first person that beats Jack Shore is going to be the person that overwhelms him, and I think that could be Ricky Simón. I also wonder what Jack Shore's gas tank looks like if he is fighting off takedowns for those first 10 minutes, if he's still going to have that danger, the pop on his shots, the ability to find the back in the third round. I don't know if it's going to be there. So give me Ricky Simón. Again, my mind could change, but I'm going to go with the underdog there. Next at 8,300, we have Dustin Jacoby. He's fighting Jung. I think that Dustin Jacoby just cruises here. I think Jacoby has the better technique. I think he has the better striking, the more crisp striking, and I think that if this fight hits the clinch, he is going to be able to dictate where it goes. And I don't think that he's going to get takedowns in this fight, but I think that if Jung initiates a clinch, I think Jacoby is going to be able to use footwork. I think he's going to be able to land good knees, elbows, manipulate Jung's balance, get him out of the clinch, get the fight back at range. I think he just outpoints Jung here. I really just like the steadiness of Dustin Jacoby on the feet, and I think in a kickboxing type of MMA fight against most of the 205-pound division, he's going to win. And I think that he's going to win this fight as well this week. So give me Dustin Jacoby by decision. Next at 8,200, we have a UFC debut here with Emily Ducote. She's going to be fighting Jessica Penne this week. Now, normally I'm not looking to play people who make their debut, especially against somebody with as much experience as Jessica Penne. The issue for me, though, is that Jessica Penne is almost 40 years old. That age does worry me, and it also worries me that she has had a lot of close fights. But what worries me on this side of the matchup with Gordinha is that she's making her debut and she might not fight to the best of her ability. I would be especially worried for her if Jessica Penne had a more grappling heavy game plan, if she was going to come in here and get takedowns, but I don't think that she's going to do that. So I will take Gordinha in this spot. Emily Ducote is the pick. It's going to be by decision. Take the over. And now I'll quickly just review the plays at 8,000 and below for you. And again, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment for the algorithm. You only got a few minutes left. At 8,000, Jessica Penne, again, the age scares me. The lack of takedowns scare me. I'm really not all that interested in playing her this week. Jung, I don't think that he offers enough to Dustin Jacoby to get the job job done here. You like that he got the knockout over Kennedy and Zejiku, but that just was weird, man. 8 takedowns with the same trip against William Knight. I don't rate William Knight. I think William Knight is trash. Slow Mike Rodriguez is trash. To have a draw to Sam Alvey in 2020, no way. Ricky Simone is a beast. He is super experienced. He's landing a ton of takedowns, and I think that he can put Jack Shore on the back foot. I think he could put Jack Shore on his back. I think he could give him trouble. I think his O has to go this week. Give me Ricky Simone. Yair Rodriguez at 7,700. Yeah, you're going to want him in your lineups when you play cash. You're going to want to stack him up. He scored 81 points against Max Holloway down at 6,700. You would have needed him that night. But I don't think that he has the skill set to be able to hang with Brian Ortega, so I see a late finish coming for Brian Ortega, but I think before then he's going to land a lot of strikes and he's going to do things that get him a decent amount of points. Jingliang, I think that there's a chance here. I think that he might be able to win a decision here. Muslim Salikhov's old, and Jingliang does throw with a lot of power, so you might see a situation where he shocks everybody, breaks the slate at 7,600 with a knockout. Herbert Burns, I might just look like a crazy person for thinking that Herbert Burns has a chance this week, but if he goes out there, shoots for takedowns right away, he's going to be able to get him. He's going to be able to go to work on top, maybe grab up an arm bar, arm triangle, get a triangle choke, something. Lauren Murphy, just not a good enough skill set. She's older. I think that she's outgunned everywhere. Dustin Stoltzfus, not the kind of guy that I would ever tell you to bet on. Charles Jourdain, I think that Charles Jourdain, again, can match that output. I think that he lands a little bit heavier than Shane Burgos. I think that he's still getting better, even though he's been around for a while. I like Charles Jourdain this week. Matt Schnell, I think this is a spot where people are going to get to because they understand that Matt Schnell is a dangerous guy. He can find a way to win this fight. Just like in his last fight, he knocked down Brandon Royval right in the beginning of the fight. I think that he could do something similar this week and maybe even find a submission on the mat. When Sumudaerji was going to fight Manel Kape, that was one of the things that we talked about on this channel. I saw other channels talk about it as well, that grappling upside from Manel Kape was going to give him problems. I think that Matt Schnell is a better grappler than Manel Kape. You obviously worry about the footwork of Sumudaerji to just rip time off the clock. You also worry about the power that he can land with, but again, I think that Matt Schnell is a little bit better than what people have kind of made him out to be. And I don't hold the loss against Brandon Royval against them. Dalcha Lungiambula, no thank you. Michelle Waterson, no thank you. If you have made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. We will see you later in the week for the final picks video. Again, like, comment, subscribe. That way I can bring more of this to you.